And Sarah, shall we get into this big story that's been developing for a long time now, really, but it's coming to a head this week, it seems. Newsmax reports Trump meets advisors on Iran as war threat grows. President Trump met yesterday with top advisors to evaluate strategy on Iran's nuclear program as the U.S. expands its military footprint in the region amid rising tensions. The U.S. and Iran held a second round of talks on Tehran's nuclear program Tuesday in Geneva. So the talks have been going on. The U.S. is continuing with its position, we don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of reports coming out. I'm going to read off a couple of them. These are coming out of Israel. Israeli emergency services and the Home Front Command have been instructed to prepare for war as officials assess imminent U.S. strike on Iran. The Israeli Home Front Command has been instructed to prepare for a full-scale war with Iran, with a high-level defensive alert having been declared across Israel. And the chief of the Israeli Home Front Command said that they are preparing for a large multi-front scenario. So lots of reports coming out that Israel is all on guard for this to advance quickly. Meanwhile, the U.S. keeps saying, well, we're going to wait and see how things play out. Trump has said himself, we're going to wait and see how things play out. We don't want to move too quickly. Meanwhile, there's reports constantly of more and more U.S. military presence moving into the Middle East, tanker planes flying constantly back and forth, going from Europe to the Middle East, nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers moving into the waters around the Middle East. So it's just increasing, and I hesitate to say, this is going to be the big one, because so far, every time that people say, it's about to happen, Trump's finally going to go back on his campaign promise and get involved in a war overseas. Every time that's happened so far, it's kind of been a nothing burger. There's been an airstrike, or there's been a bombing campaign briefly, and then it just ends. There's no boots on the ground. There's no actual going to war overseas. It's not to say you can't criticize U.S. foreign intervention in this way. There's plenty of room to get into that. But we have yet to see Trump actually go to war in that way. And so I'm hesitant to predict it finally happening this time. But it does seem like things are heating up.
It does. But you said that, this has been going on for a long time. And I instantly, my mind just jumped right back to Dick Cheney, and his promotion of war with Iran. So, this has been such a protracted issue with that nation, which, don't get me wrong, before I go any further, yes, it's a despotic, evil regime, just to be clear. The question isn't whether it's a despotic, evil regime, but how much intervention we should have in that, and whether we want to create another Afghanistan and so on. Because our history of nation building in the region is, I'm just going to say, problematic. Most American citizens don't want a war with Iran, and yet we're moving seemingly perpetually in that direction. I think that what you see being pushed around in terms of, you can often understand what our intelligence agencies want us to understand by looking at what the media is reporting, because they have that sort of Operation Mockingbird relationship. And so the emphasis on the protests that's going on in Iran that they keep telling us about is also sort of this promotion of the idea that, well, most people in Iran at this point do not share the extremist Islamic opinion of those who are in charge. And the argument that thereafter is because, and it's sort of like implied, because the regular citizens do not share this extremist Islamic understanding, if we were simply to get rid of the hierarchy, things would just sort of work themselves out. And I'm a little bit hesitant to say yes to that. I wish that were the case, that you have just the people at the top who are solely the problem. And yes, they are the large part of the problem, but I don't see that there is enough of a rejection of that at the citizen level, such that if you were to simply remove, as if that could ever be a simple task, simply remove the hierarchy, that the nation would become, something that was good and something that, we could trade with and be friends with. And I simply haven't seen that. They may be less Islamic, less extreme in their following of the Quran than those in charge, or they're more secular, which means that you're sort of leaving this, I don't know, this void, this hole there, this perhaps spiritual and political vacuum ready to be filled by the next ISIS. Because honestly, that's what we have seen when we've gone between these different countries over there in the Middle East. We come in, we don't want to impose a culture, because for some reason that's part of like American world building. I don't agree with it, but this is our understanding of American world building is we go in, we remove the dictator, and then we just kind of see what happens for the most part, because we're unwilling to say, hey, we have this culture of our own, it's better than your culture. This is what the British imperialism did.
Yes.
And therefore we're going to kind of impose that upon you, and you can actually be a good, productive body and member of the world. We don't do that in America, and we're told that instead it's way better if you just remove the despot and you let people democratically do their own thing. And what actually happens is we leave this void, we leave this power vacuum, some other extremist group comes in, we switch from Al-Qaeda to ISIS or something, and we go, oh, well, why didn't that work? And we just kind of repeat the whole thing. I hate it, Jake. It drives me insane.
Yeah, if you're going to act as if you're the father of the world and you're going to go in and smack people around and remove the people you don't like, then you should actually take that seriously and do your duty after the fact. Don't just come home from work, smack around the kids, and then go sit on the couch and drink beer. Actually discipline and guide these people you consider your children.
Yes.
That's the simple fact of it. So, as you said, the British Empire used to take that more seriously. They said, okay, we're going to go in. We don't like how this is run, so we're just going to run it ourselves, and we're going to run it properly. And that's much more responsible in that sense. Now, maybe you want to argue that that's not fair. It's not your right to go in and do that, so on and so forth. You and I, as fans of Western civilization and Christendom, even when it's a Protestant empire like the British Empire, we think that's still better than going in and seeing all these horrible pagan practices that they have in these pagan countries. Yeah. We make that argument. But even so, what clearly just going in and removing the head and then letting things sort out in the chaos is not a responsible way to deal with this. So I do agree with you there. And we do want to... This is the part of the problem with the Iranian situation, is that the U.S. can't even seem to decide what it wants to do in that case. The U.S. can't even decide whether it wants to make a deal with the current administration or whether it wants to conduct a regime change, what it wants to do after the fact. And in this situation, also, it's all tied into what Israel wants, which is a big case. Israel's influence over the U.S. is well known at this point, and Israel is very clearly anti-Iran and anti the current regime. So things get even more complex than just the U.S. wanting to address its own direct interests in the region.
Oh, certainly. A huge part of our involvement at all in a large bulk of the Middle East, candidly, is our alliance with Israel. So that is a huge part of our foreign policy as well. And so I know that the Trump administration has been trying to involve Israel, including in these negotiations, to try and work out some kind of peace. Yeah. But it's a difficult thing because we're all coming from very different moral policies. Like, how do you work out peace with a government like that of Iran without validating who they are?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And it's similar with Israel. How do you work out a peace that's based on a more, okay, let's be charitable to the Trump administration and to the United States and say there's at least general Christian principles at work in the origin of the country and in the origin of the American attitude towards things. Let's make that charitable assumption. We're coming from a Western Christendom sort of foundation. Meanwhile, Israel has a much different worldview because it's Old Testament. It's Judaism. It's the development of Judaism after Christianity forms. It's actually younger. The current modern form of Judaism is younger than Christianity. Let's be clear on that. And it's coming from a completely different view towards the world. The eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth attitude. If we don't like what's going on in Gaza, we're going to glass the place type of thing. And how do you come to an agreement there when you've got two completely different ways of looking at the world and ways of looking at what's worthwhile? So you've got these disagreements, and then you're dealing with Iran. And if you're going to take sides here, I don't want to take sides with Iran or with Israel in this case because I don't like the way either country is run. So you're trying to, as the U.S., and I just saw part of the report here is that Rubio is planning to visit Israel at the end of the month for talks about Iran. So again, there's this weird collusion here. And just from a objective standpoint, you go ahead.
It is officially a secular state. Israel is
officially
to make that clear. Officially, it's a secular state, but like in the same way that we are. Right, just to make that parallel, okay? Yes. We in America are officially a secular state, but the Christian worldviews that are part of our culture are reflected in the way that we negotiate, and in theory, at least, in the way that we go to war, right? Because they affect who we are as human beings, because we grow up here in this sort of semi or perhaps post-Christian society, and therefore they affect all of us. In the same way, when you look over Israel, you're seeing a secular state, but they also have a cultural understanding because you have a sort of Talmudic religion that is over there, that is part of their culture, because their culture descends from their religion, just like ours does as well. Just to make that parallel. Sorry, Jake.
No, that's okay. And the point I was going to make is that you objectively, how do you expect Iran to take your negotiations seriously if you're also negotiating or colluding with another country against you? From Iran's point of view, okay, the U.S. says they want to make a deal with us, and it's maybe not exactly what we want, but we're willing to conduct the diplomacy. And meanwhile, the U.S. is having private talks with Israel about what to do about you. That's the standpoint from Iran. And again, I am not in favor of the current Iranian regime. I am in favor of whatever is best for Christians in these countries. Christians in Iran, Christians in Israel, who see a lot of persecution. And so this situation is really at such a higher level about that, and having to do with geopolitics and having to do with America's goals, Israel's goals, where those connect. And I don't think it's necessarily going to end up being in the best interest of the actual people on the ground, the people who are going to be affected in these countries, especially in Iran.
Yeah, when you look at the people who are there, they're in a really difficult spot, especially Christians, like you said, in those countries and also in Gaza. I mean, the entire area is just, candidly anti-Christian. And that's the thing that I think about when I think of Israel. I think a lot of people forget that so many Christians are persecuted over in Israel. So it's not like we have this sort of level moral playing field, and we have to remember that. And I certainly don't want to see American troops be killed in any of this. Yes. And that's what we're trying to avoid, and hopefully the Trump administration is trying to avoid that. It certainly seems like it, because if they had wanted to go to war, they had many opportunities beforehand. Yes. I'll say that much.
Yes, that is true. We need to give them credit for at least dragging this out and trying, or at least appearing to try, I suppose. So
we'll see.
Let's pray for a peaceful solution no matter what.
Absolutely.